The day I lost my equity. I never thought about the word equity until the day I lost everything. I had spent 10 years building my small restaurant. Every morning, I opened the doors with pride, knowing that my hard work had created something valuable. Customers loved our food, and my employees respected me. My business wasn't just a source of income. It was my equity, the true value of all my effort and dedication. Then, one morning, the landlord called. "Your lease is up," he said. "If you want to stay, the rent will double." "Double? That's impossible," I protested. But he didn't care. I had no contract, no protection. My equity, built over years, meant nothing in his eyes. I had invested everything into this place, my time, my money, my dreams. And now, it could all be taken away. Desperate, I went to the bank. "Can I use my business equity to get a loan?" I asked. The banker shook his head. "Your business has value. But without ownership of the property, your equity is limited." Limited. The word felt like a punch. That night, I sat in my empty restaurant, staring at the walls. The laughter of customers, the clinking of glasses, memories of a place that might not be mine tomorrow. I had always thought equity meant fairness. But now I realized it also meant the true worth of what I had built. The next morning, I made a choice. If I couldn't save this place, I would build another. My equity wasn't just in the building. It was in me. The day I became a liability. For 10 years, I was the company's star employee. I worked late, met deadlines, and trained new staff. I was an asset until the day I wasn't. It started with a small mistake. I miscalculated a budget report, and the company lost money. The manager called me in. "This mistake is a liability to the company," he said. Liability. I had never thought about that word before. I apologized, worked harder, and tried to prove myself again. But then, it happened again, another mistake. This time, the company lost an important client. "You're becoming a liability," my manager repeated. His voice was colder now. I felt the shift. My colleagues, who once valued me, now avoided eye contact. Every meeting, every project, I could feel it. I wasn't an asset anymore. I was a liability. The final blow came on a Friday. "We have to let you go," the manager said. "You're a financial liability." I left the office carrying a box of my things. 10 years. Gone. Was I really just a liability? For weeks, I stayed home, questioning everything. Then, one evening, I met an old friend who owned a small business. "I need someone with experience," he said. "Your knowledge is an asset to me." Asset, not liability. That night, I realized something. A liability in one place could be an asset somewhere else. I wasn't useless. I just needed a new place to grow. And so, I started again. When monopoly took everything. I had spent my whole life running my little bookstore. It wasn't just a business. It was my dream. People in town loved my shop. Parents bought storybooks. Students found textbooks, and old men drank coffee while flipping through novels. Then the monopoly arrived. A massive bookstore chain opened across the street. They had everything, cheap prices, endless discounts, and a huge marketing budget. I couldn't compete. My loyal customers slowly disappeared. "I'm sorry," they would say. "The new store is just cheaper." That was the power of a monopoly. Day by day, my sales dropped. My shelves, once full of bestsellers, now gathered dust. The monopoly didn't just sell books, it sold coffee, stationery, and even toys. It had everything. One evening, I watched through my window as the monopoly store filled with people. My shop, on the other hand, was empty. My bookstore, my life's work, was becoming history. I had to do something. I started offering personalized book recommendations. I organized reading events, invited local authors, and turned my shop into a warm, unique place. Slowly, customers returned, not for cheap prices, but for something the monopoly couldn't offer: a personal touch. A monopoly can control prices, but it can't replace passion. The big store still stands, but so do I. I may not have their power, but I have something better: real connections with people. And that, no monopoly can take away. When inflation stole my morning coffee, I never used to think about inflation. Prices went up sometimes, sure, but life moved on. Every morning, I stopped at Joe's Cafe for a coffee. It was my small joy before work. A cup of strong, black coffee for $2. It had been that price for years. Then, one morning, Joe sighed as he handed me my cup. "Price went up," he said. "Now it's $2.50. Inflation." I frowned. "Inflation?" "Just like that." Joe shrugged. "Milk costs more. Beans cost more. I can't keep the old price." 50 cents wasn't much, so I paid. But a few weeks later, the sign changed again: $3. "Sorry, buddy," Joe said. "Inflation keeps rising." I started noticing inflation everywhere. My rent increased. My grocery bill got higher. Even my favorite lunch, a simple sandwich, cost $1 more than before. I asked my boss for a raise. He sighed. "Inflation hurts us all," he said. "Profits are down. No raises this year." No raise. But everything still cost more. One morning, I walked into Joe's Cafe and saw the new price: $4. My stomach tightened. "Joe," I said, "this is crazy." He nodded. "I know. But what can I do? The cost of everything is rising. It's inflation." That day, I didn't buy coffee. I just walked out. At home, I tried making coffee myself. It wasn't the same. I missed the smell of Joe's Cafe, the warmth of the cup in my hands, the quick chat before work. Inflation hadn't just raised prices, it had stolen my small joys. A week later, I passed by Joe's Cafe. The door had a sign: "Closed forever." Joe stood outside, looking at the empty shop. "Inflation killed my business," he said. "People stopped buying. I couldn't keep up." I looked at him, then at the dark windows of his once busy cafe. Inflation wasn't just numbers. It was real. It took from all of us. That was the day I truly understood inflation. The recession took my job, but not my hope. I had worked at the same company for 10 years. It wasn't my dream job, but it paid the bills. Then, one morning, my boss called me into his office. "I'm sorry," he said. "The recession is hitting us hard. We have to let you go." I sat there, frozen. "But I've been here for 10 years." He sighed. "The recession is affecting everyone. We can't afford to keep all our employees." That was the first time I felt the weight of the word recession. At home, I told my wife. She looked worried but tried to smile. "We'll be okay," she said. "You'll find something else." But finding another job wasn't easy. The recession had hit the whole city. Shops closed, businesses struggled, and everywhere I went, people were looking for work. Each rejection felt heavier than the last. "We're not hiring because of the recession," they would say. Bills piled up. Our savings shrank. Every day I searched for jobs, but the recession had left few opportunities. One evening, my wife put a plate of simple rice and beans in front of me. "I know it's not much," she said. I shook my head. "It's enough." But inside I felt helpless. The recession had taken my job, my confidence, my peace of mind. Then, one day, I saw an old man selling handmade furniture in the park. His work was beautiful. "Did you make these?" I asked. He nodded. "I lost my job in the recession years ago. So, I started making furniture." That night, I thought about what I could do. I had always loved fixing things. So, with my last bit of money, I bought tools and started repairing broken furniture. At first, it was slow. But then, neighbors started bringing me chairs, tables, and shelves. Word spread. Slowly, the recession became just a word, not a prison. The recession had taken my job, but it also pushed me to create something new. Arbitration saved my family business, or did it? I grew up watching my father run our small family restaurant. It wasn't just a business, it was our life. But when my father passed away, everything changed. My uncle, who had helped manage the restaurant, claimed that half of it belonged to him. I disagreed. "Dad left it to me," I said. He shook his head. "No, we built this together. I deserve my share." The arguments grew worse. One day, my uncle said, "We need arbitration." I had heard of arbitration before but never thought I'd need it. It was a way to solve disputes without going to court. A neutral person, called an arbitrator, would listen to both sides and make a decision. We met with the arbitrator, an older man with kind eyes. "Arbitration is fair," he assured us. "You both present your arguments, and I will decide." My uncle spoke first. "I invested my money, my time, and my effort. Without me, this restaurant wouldn't exist." I replied, "But my father left it to me. That was his wish. I have been running it alone since he passed away." The arbitrator listened carefully. After hours of discussion, he finally spoke. "I have made my decision," he said. I held my breath. "The restaurant will remain with you," he told me. "However, your uncle will receive a percentage of the profits for the next 5 years." It wasn't what I wanted, but arbitration meant compromise. My uncle accepted the decision, and we shook hands, reluctantly. Months passed. Business improved. My uncle still got his share, but at least the restaurant was mine. Arbitration had solved our conflict, but it had also changed our relationship. We spoke less, and something between us felt broken. One evening, I looked at the restaurant, thinking, was arbitration really the best solution? Entrepreneurship cost me everything, or so I thought. I always dreamed of success, but success, I learned, wasn't easy. I quit my job to start my own business. Entrepreneurship was my path to freedom, or so I believed. I had an idea, a great idea. A mobile cafe that moved around the city, bringing fresh coffee to busy people. At first, everything seemed perfect. My small truck was my pride, my customers loved my coffee, and every morning I woke up excited. Entrepreneurship was thrilling. But then came the struggles. Supplies were expensive. Permits were complicated. One morning, my truck wouldn't start. Another day, my best supplier raised prices. I worked harder, slept less, but the money ran out faster than I could make it. My wife, Lisa, was worried. "Maybe you should go back to a job," she said. I shook my head. No. Entrepreneurship is about taking risks. I just need more time. Time didn't help. My debts grew, and one evening, I sat in my truck with my head in my hand. My dream was slipping away. Then, a stranger knocked on the window. Still open. I forced a smile. Always. He bought a coffee, then sat down nearby. "I like your business," he said. "I invest in entrepreneurship. Maybe we can talk." That night, I told him everything, my struggles, my failures. He listened, then said, "You have passion, but entrepreneurship isn't just about passion. It's about learning, adapting, and sometimes accepting help." For the first time, I realized I had been too proud to ask for advice. With his guidance, I adjusted my prices, changed suppliers, and improved marketing. Months later, my mobile cafe was thriving again. I thought entrepreneurship had cost me everything. But in truth, it had only tested me. Success wasn't just about ideas, it was about persistence, learning and knowing when to adapt. Fiscal decisions almost took everything from me. When I started my own business, I thought I understood everything. But fiscal responsibility? That was something I learned the hard way. I owned a small bookstore in the heart of the city. It was my dream, my passion. Every morning, I opened the doors, arranged the books, and welcomed customers with a smile. But passion wasn't enough. A business needs good fiscal management. At first, everything seemed fine. Sales were steady, and I paid my bills on time. But I made one big mistake. I ignored my fiscal report. I never tracked expenses properly, and I never saved for emergencies. One day my supplier called. "Your payment is late," he said. I frowned. "That's impossible. I paid last month." "Yes, but this is a new fiscal cycle. You owe for this month too." I checked my account. It was nearly empty. Where had all the money gone? Rent, electricity, new books, everything added up. I had spent without planning. That night, I sat at my desk, surrounded by unpaid bills. My bookstore was failing. My poor fiscal decisions had put me in trouble. Lisa, my wife, walked in. "You need help," she said gently. "I can fix it," I insisted. She shook her head. "Ignoring fiscal problems won't make them disappear." She was right. The next day, I met with an accountant. He explained my mistakes. "You need a better fiscal plan. Cut unnecessary costs, increase savings, and always prepare for the next fiscal period." It wasn't easy, but I followed his advice. I reduced expenses, started tracking my cash flow, and made a real fiscal plan. Months later, my bookstore was stable again. I had learned an important lesson: without good fiscal management, no business can survive. Passion is important, but understanding fiscal responsibility is what keeps dreams alive. The procurement mistake that almost ended everything. I was excited when I got the opportunity to manage a new project at work. We were launching a new product, and I was in charge of the procurement. At first, everything seemed simple. How hard could it be to buy the right materials at the right price? I soon learned the answer to that question. The first step was to find suppliers for the materials we needed. My job was to handle all the procurement. I had to research the best suppliers, negotiate prices, and make sure everything arrived on time. It sounded easy enough, but things didn't go as planned. I started by choosing the cheapest supplier. I thought I was being smart, saving money for the company. But I didn't check their reliability. I didn't look at reviews or ask for references. I only cared about price. A few days later, the materials arrived, but they weren't what we needed. The quality was terrible. I called the supplier, but they didn't respond to my emails. The whole project was at risk. My boss was furious. "You're in charge of the procurement. You should have done more research." I felt terrible. I had made a huge mistake, and now everything was falling apart. I learned that procurement wasn't just about finding the cheapest deal. It was about finding the right supplier, the right materials, and making sure everything worked together perfectly. I immediately started fixing my mistake. I contacted another supplier, one with a good reputation. I paid a little more, but the materials were perfect. The project was back on track. After that experience, I learned how important procurement really is. It's not just about getting things for the lowest price. It's about finding the best solution for the company, with good quality and reliable service. Procurement is a skill that requires careful planning and research. When one path leads to 1,000. A few years ago, I started a small business. It was a coffee shop, just a simple cafe in the middle of the city. I loved my job and thought it would be enough. However, I quickly realized something important: diversification was key. At first, I only sold coffee. People loved it, but there was a problem. When sales slowed down, I didn't have anything else to offer. Some days, the shop was almost empty. I knew I had to change something if I wanted to stay in business. One day, a friend suggested I try diversification. "Don't just sell coffee," she said. "Offer something else." I wasn't sure what she meant, but I decided to give it a try. The first step was simple. I added cakes and pastries to the menu. It wasn't much, but it was a start. To my surprise, more people came in for coffee and cake together. But I didn't stop there. I thought about other things I could offer. I added fresh juices and smoothies, then even small sandwiches. Each time I added something new, my customers were happier. They started coming in more often, and my sales grew. I realized that diversification wasn't just about adding products, it was about offering a variety of options for different people. Some customers liked a light snack, others wanted a full meal. By offering a range of choices, I made sure I was never dependent on just one thing. If one item didn't sell well, another would. As the years went by, my business grew. I began offering catering services and even started selling coffee beans online. With each step, I was practicing diversification. My business was no longer just a coffee shop. It had become a brand with many options. Today, my cafe is thriving. I look back and see how important diversification has been. If I hadn't made the decision to expand beyond just coffee, I might not have survived. Diversification is about exploring new possibilities, taking risks, and finding multiple ways to succeed.